gider ikke installere?
Det er fordi, at min Mac kun kan til at installere noget som Mac. Så
Nå, så vi skal.
hvis du gerne lægge på noget, så skal du til at der.
Og så virker det.
Så bare til at der. Hvis du er avanceret, så skal du også til at der.
Så skal vi bare med det nye. Men jeg spurgte, at han var sådan, du var ikke kørt selv, hvis det er.
Okay, det er fordi, du er ikke ventet, jeg tror, lidt på.
Okay.
Så får jeg lidt der.
Okay. Everything seems to be working. I don't know if this is gonna. So yeah, any technical issues? Yeah, I mean, like I've got the 3D graphics here, so you know I'm serious, right? So basically, yes, welcome. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And I figured today would be a good opportunity to just go over some of like the really broad and basic concepts. So we're not going to be doing anything like super crazy or whatever. But the idea was that if you did have the virtual machine and stuff set up, you can attempt at cracking your own password, so you can see how easy it is, I suppose, and potentially get worried about, you know, how secure all your data is and everything. So I should have, I don't know if I can just, hey, it works, good. Yeah, so the idea was to just cover a little bit of the history, some of the approaches to like hacking in general and just computer security, you know, ethics, and specifically I want to talk a fair bit about social engineering, because while most people think of hacking as just computers and technology and all of that kind of stuff, it's more actually about the people, because the most common way to get into a system is through people, and I'll cover that as well in a minute. And yeah, so we'll hopefully be able to, you know, you get to be a hacker by cracking a password. And I did have lockpicking on schedule, but I forgot to bring my locks. So I have like 10 lockpicking sets, but I still have one that I carry around with me. So there is a lockpicking set. If anyone has a lock, we can try that. Otherwise, maybe we can try breaking into some school property. And yeah, some resources which I can add later, because I didn't actually put the slide with the resources, so it's a lie. Yeah, so basically this is my old house when I was younger, and I'm not sure what was going on in this photo because this is not even me. That was my computer. It was my friend using it, and I have no idea what's happening. So I actually tried originally to find a photo that I know exists somewhere, but I think it's physical, of me being very young in front of a computer, but whatever, that'll have to do. And this is essentially what my first computer looked like. So I started pretty young, like I think I was 5 or something, and then my parents got this, and they didn't know how to use it, so they relied on me to figure it out. And basically it was just a matter of like following instructions, because you used to have to put a tape in, and then you'd say run this program, and normally it would come with instructions like, you know, 2 or 3 steps that you had to do. And eventually I like got a subscription when I was like quite young to one of these computer magazines, and in the end of them they had these pages which you could like manually type out and reproduce to make a code, so you could make a little game on the Commodore 64 and things like that. So about my qualifications, well, I don't really have any like official qualifications because I didn't even go to high school until like 2 years ago. So it was just all kind of self-taught. But like I did work in the Danish porn industry for a while, which I think is a pretty important, relevant qualification, not because of the content, but because of the kind of challenges you face, because it's a website with huge amounts of like data and lots of users and lots of issues that come along with that, because you have to deal with people trying to intentionally break the site, people trying to steal information, and just stupid users in general that do things that they shouldn't do, and then you find out that something goes wrong. So I think that's kind of like an interesting point of where I was looking at things specifically from like a security perspective. And I'm also the co-founder of like this organization which is mostly inactive, but it was with a friend of mine from Sweden, and like I've known him for many, many years. And we started just like doing security work and consulting. And as part of that, we participated in a NATO cybersecurity conference, which was specifically talking about cybersecurity as being like the kind of, I guess, fourth frontier or whatever of international relations and warfare. So they wanted perspectives from like people in cybersecurity about how we need to look at these problems and manage them. And like they didn't really have any expertise in that field, so we were there to provide that point of view as well, which was really fun and interesting. Also to see like these, starred military generals and stuff kind of like asking questions to us and me, who never feels like I know anything about anything. So then all of my like programming work that I've done, it's always had this security and performance focus. So like when you're working, especially with web stuff, it's important to think about, because you can't rely on what people put into their browser, even if it's accidental. Like, if you have a very simple example, I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail later, but if you have something as simple as a form for someone's email address and you put that straight into your database, if they put a comma or a semicolon or a quote in that thing by accident, that could break your whole database. It sounds stupid, but that's how it is, unfortunately. And this is the kind of, I guess I had somewhat of a hacker mindset before I kind of became interested in the whole thing, because I always loved pulling things apart, like everything. And I think that's like one of the key things of the whole hacker mindset, is to just break things. Like, you can try and fix them again, and sometimes it's not successful. Most of the time I ended up with leftover screws and pieces, and I didn't know where they came from. But usually you could pull something apart, like physically, and then put it back together. And the same applies to computer systems. You can break it, and as long as you're kind of a little bit aware of your data, like you have something backed up, then you're not going to really lose anything. The worst case is you have to like wipe it and start again, which I had to do many, many times. And I don't know, when I was 13 or something, I thought it was funny to install Trojans on my friends' computers, so then I could this is when there were CD drives, you could pop out their CD drive while they were sitting there, or things like that. I mean, I didn't do anything really that bad with it. It was more of a prank, but that does illustrate, at least to me at the time and also to them, how easy it is to do. If I can do it, then people intending to do it absolutely can. Yes?
Did they pay you to tell them what issue they had?
No, I was. That's a good way to get business. Not very ethical though. No. I always made sure it wasn't like some kind of deep inserted thing. It was more like just set up to automatically run or whatever, and then to get rid of it was easy. I didn't make it infect every file on their computer or something. I wasn't that kind of friend. But and when I was 15, and I'm not sure whether to be proud of this or not, but my cousin, she's a bit older than I am, and her boyfriend was wronged at his work in not a very nice way. And she just sent me a text and was like, hey, do you think you can hack into this company and do something? And I was like, well, I don't know, but that sounds like a challenge, so I'm going to give it a go. And that's essentially what I did. I started thinking about how I could do it, and I guess this was also before I really knew about the idea of social engineering and that, but I thought, if I want to send something in, how am I going to get people to open this file? And it was the easiest way. Hey, no worries. We're all late, it's fine. And so I thought the easiest way to do that maybe was to pretend to be from that company. And now looking back, obviously at the time, I thought I was doing a really clever and smart job of it. I was just lucky enough to be in Australia at a time where cybersecurity wasn't really a thing. Otherwise I could have been, probably not in jail, but at least in big trouble. I know other people had been banned from using computers for years and the internet and that kind of thing for similar kinds of exploits. But what I did, I wrote in a programming language called Visual Basic, a little script that just read all of the contacts on the person's email and Word documents and everything like that, and then would send this same email pretending to be from whatever company the email domain was. So if it's like business.com, it would say like business.com tech support. Here's a patch. We've noticed there's a problem on your system. Click here to open it. And it was like just called, I don't know, update something or other .exe. And unfortunately for them, they had enough people that believed it and opened it, and I brought the whole company down because it was a very malicious virus. It deleted every file on their hard drive. So, yeah. So kind of proud, but not really. It could have gone horribly wrong. And yeah, so that was kind of like my start. But, you know, there was also this, I guess because I had this affinity for technology or whatever, there was also this kind of like aesthetic thing, which obviously is not necessarily appealing to everyone. But, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Hackers, but this illustrates like how sexy and unsexy it is. Angelina Jolie.
How you doing?
Yes.
Cool, I'm just looking. It's too much machine for you.
Yeah?
I hope you don't screw like your time.
It has a killer refresh rate.
D6 chip. Triple the speed of the Pentium.
Yeah. It's not just a chip, it has a PCI bus. But you knew that.
Indeed.
I mean, even at the time when I watched that movie first, I thought that was a bit ridiculous. But it's one of those things where, yeah, the movie kind of glorifies it a bit. It's really interesting. I think it's one of the better hacker culture movies anyway. It's just kind of fun. It's like an adventure, but it does highlight some of the issues that people actually have encountered in real life, like actually going to jail or being barred from using technology just for accessing a system, not even doing anything illegal. Like there's this really long-standing divide, I guess, between the public's opinion and what hackers actually do and the government. Because now, in modern times, the government makes full use of that. And I don't just mean like the Danish government, it's like every government. They have teams of cybersecurity experts. So yeah, like a brief kind of thing through the history. So we have the 60s, that was kind of when the coin was termed. And it was essentially about people that were like tinkering with machinery. This could be like anything, including like model trains or actual server mainframes, or just, you know, pulling things apart, changing them, making them how you want, trying different things with it. And then in the 70s, with the advent of phone lines in everyone's house, there was this phreaking, and this one particular famous phreaker called Captain Crunch, named so because of the cereal. There came this whistle, and it actually was the exact right tone for, I think it was like the hang-up tone for the phone systems in the US. So if you covered one of these holes, then you could blow the whistle, and if you walked past a bunch of people on public payphones, all of their phones would hang up. So this was because the infrastructure of the phone lines back in the time was all based on tones. So even putting coins in would make a tone. So eventually people came up with ways to record these tones, play them back, or make them synthesized and be able to just, yeah, fake putting money in the phones and stuff. And here is a blue box, so-called blue box. So there's different colored boxes, and all of them do different things to do with phones. This one I made in Python, which you're all very familiar with now. And it's just to put the frequencies of the tones that you probably never hear anymore, but used to hear when you press the phone buttons and it makes the noises. So you could, before they added security, make a blue box and hold it to a payphone and just make free calls. And yeah, this kind of thing was really good because a lot of the people doing this were also people that were very familiar with technology and had lots of friends across the world and had no way to keep in contact with them, and making a long distance call was insanely expensive. So it was more out of a mischievous rather than nefarious kind of thing, like this early hacking, and I would argue that a lot of it still is. And from them, now when computers became more accessible for everyone, you were able to do things like war dialing, because people started connecting their computers to networks or phone lines or whatever, even just a fax machine, doesn't matter. But you could war dial, which was literally just get a list of numbers, and they were obviously shorter back then as well, so you could have like the area code and then 4 numbers after it, and you could write a script that would dial every single number in that list, so from 0000, 0001 and so forth, and then you'd just keep a log, or it would print it out or whatever every time there was a computer that answered rather than a person. And you could do this all through the night, and then you'd find computers, you could access them and see what you could do with those systems. And then the 1990s, like bulletin board systems and stuff were already kind of popular by then, which are just central places where people could log in, share information and messages. And there was communities for everything, like everything you can possibly imagine there was a community for. It was like the early internet, but represented just in text. So you'd log in, you'd see like a forum or something, you'd go and you'd go to a section like alt comp hacking, and then there'd be a section for hacking or gardening or whatever. You know, it doesn't matter. They had everything. It's like modern times, but just way less advanced. And demo scene and viruses sort of started picking up a lot in this period as well. Demo scene is people that would just write like tiny little scripts that maybe were a virus, maybe not, but they would also just like push computers to their limits at the time. And they were really interesting and cool, and like just technologically advanced for the time. So the people that did this were really smart. And I actually wanted to see if it works. I had this, So this is what the Commodore 64 interface looked like. So this is the kind of first UI that I experienced. And I have here a file. Where is it? So this was a program that someone made in the 70s. No, I put it in the wrong spot. Don't take computer advice from me. I don't even know how to do this. Alright, so we should sound, is it on, off? I don't know, it doesn't say. Let's try one more. If this doesn't work, then it doesn't matter. It was just to demo how these the blue box and other colored boxes worked. Alright, drop. Okay, so far. Okay, so this is the kind of stuff you used to have to type, like load, device 8, number 1, whatever, and all this kind of stuff. Like sound on. Okay. The sound is kind of important. And yeah, like this is running through a web-based emulator, so it's slow, but actually it's quite realistic. You can download a Commodore 64 emulator to run on your computer, and it will run a lot faster than things used to do, but you have to remember everything was read off a tape, so it was very, very slow. But basically, this person, I guess, felt the need to distribute some software to make it easy for everyone, and this was probably something that would be distributed over a bulletin board system or whatever to share the knowledge with other people, which I think is one of the other kind of core aspects of like the hack culture or whatever, is just that, you know, you want to share the information, not just keep it guarded under lock and key. So we should, I think I can just press key. Yes. V. So this is the kind of way interfaces used to be, because you didn't even have a mouse necessarily. So they have the whole menu of different things you can do, and this is all the different colored boxes, red, black, neon. They all did different things. Like ones were for the money. I think a black box was specifically for money, and blue box was just for like dial tones and stuff. And yes, the hang up tone. Do we want pink noise? No. And then, I don't know, 555. And that will do. So this was a number you could call. Like the idea with these dialers is if you did it from your home system, you'd call a toll-free number. You'd send the hang-up tone, but it would still stay connected. So you would be not charged for any call you made after that. And if everything works, it should. So you'd put your computer or record it or put it next to the the telephone line, and all these sounds would come out, and it would just bypass all the technology. And that's how easy it was, like even back then. Now they've got security in place to stop these kind of things, obviously, because technology has also advanced in security. All right, let's get back to this. Okay, so this here is actually what your computer would have shown if you were infected with the LSD virus. This one was kind of destructive, but a lot of the early day viruses were not meant to be destructive. They were just proof of concepts. So there's different kind of categories, but essentially like they're all just about getting unauthorized software onto your machine for whatever purpose. But you have viruses, so that just that like replicates, but that can be done via users as well, like just by opening a file that you're not supposed to, and it sends something. Worms are a little bit different because they use underlying vulnerabilities in the system, so they don't actually necessarily require any user interaction. You just have to have a system connected to the internet, and then they'll get in. There's been plenty of examples like this, including Stuxnet, which was one I might talk a bit more about later, but it was infecting like the Iranian nuclear refinery like places, and they were trying to do that to, it was a state-based attack, so this was like really crazy. No one could kind of directly pin it to the US, but everyone knows it was the US government that was doing this, getting hackers to like hack in and mess with this and write custom virus and stuff. The whole thing is like really interesting to learn about, and I can recommend a podcast if you're interested. And yeah, Trojans, this is where you, like the classic Trojan, you embed one thing inside of another. So someone opens a piece of software, and then while they do that, in the background, it installs something that allows remote access. And this is the interface from an old, I guess, Trojan creator, like a wizard to make your own Trojan. You'd get this software, they called it a remote administration tool, which was a lie because no one actually used it to administer computers and deal with problems. This was always used to like put viruses and stuff. But you just say, all right, I want to say, put a fake message when they open it up. And so they open it, it's like, there's been a problem with the computer, just click OK. So they think the application didn't work, but in the background it installed the virus. And then you could do all these fun things like, open the CD-ROM, start the speakers, turn the monitors off and on. This is under extra fun. So yeah, you can see they had a sense of humor. And so you have these, I guess in a way to kind of categorize it. So I think a lot of the terminology, like everything we've been learning about as well, it just comes as a result of the need for categorization and being able to, like, if you say you're a hacker and someone has a media image on it, they might think of this, as I mentioned with Stuxnet, or the North Korean hacks over Sony and the interview. I'm not sure if you heard about that, but basically North Korea was not very happy about this movie making fun of their dear leader, so they hacked Sony and basically blackmailed them to try and stop them from publishing the movie, which didn't actually work, but it kind of did because they didn't have a theatrical release. It went straight to like streaming or whatever. So yeah, you use vulnerabilities and exploits to sabotage, steal, deface, generally criminal activities, things like actual monetary theft. North Korea actually engaged a lot of this kind of stuff where they'll, rob from banks, that kind of thing. And they use very sophisticated methods which involve, of course, social engineering, having people in the place, and technological exploits and viruses, worms. They use all of that. And then grey hat. So this is where it's like the typical, I guess this is probably more the anonymous style hacker, I suppose you could probably categorize it like that. So everyone's favorite internet hero, Mark Zuckerberg, had this lovely guy come and post on his wall, because this guy is a security researcher or hacker, I guess, and he found a vulnerability in Facebook that through Mark Zuckerberg's account you could be anyone. So Mark Zuckerberg personally had the option to use Facebook as anyone. So this guy found an exploit in their code that allowed him to use that feature that Mark Zuckerberg could use. So they didn't listen, he tried to warn them. So this is where the thing is with the grey hat. It's like, they do things that are a bit mischievous, whatever, but you also try and warn the information, sometimes for profit, whatever. But generally it's like you try and notify the people, not use it against them, and he didn't use this to like steal people's personal data. He just posted this message saying, hey, you know, Mark, I'm posting here, you know, like you should do something about this problem. And then you've got your white hat hackers, which are generally working for private companies or alone, but doing security research. And these guys are like going through code and trying to find vulnerabilities before they're in the wild, so people can't actually exploit them and use them. And they'll help with patching. You know, like there's a lot of kind of interesting research going on in this field as well at the moment. And I wanted to show you briefly, I'm not going to show the whole thing because it's quite long, but this is one of my favorite security researchers, Mikko Hyppönen, who's a guy from Finland who runs or founded F-Secure.
My name is Mikko Hyppönen and I work here at F-Secure in Finland. And this here is Brain. Brain, the first PC virus in history. Written in January 1986, it's now 25 years old. And this here is a picture of me, almost 25 years ago, analyzing Brain. And I remember being fascinated about the virus and about how it worked, and about where it came from. And we actually know where Brain comes from, because inside the code of the Brain virus there's an address. So we know it's coming from Pakistan, and we know it's written by two brothers, Basit and Andrew. Now we're going to go and find them.
So that essentially is, you know, he's a hacker as well, but he's one of like the white hat hackers, and he does this security research. And that video is quite nice because he goes to see the people who originally coded the virus, and they didn't do anything malicious. Brain virus was just like, it popped up a message saying, hey, you know, you've been infected with this virus, and you could just close it, and that was it. But yeah, like they did that as a proof of concept again because they found out they could. And there's all these things where people use systems in ways that are unexpected, and then you discover something that no one had prepared for. And so why and how do we think like a hacker? Well, you know, just as I mentioned, you know, the joy of breaking things. It's fun to have a challenge, and if it's broken, then you have the opportunity to fix it. If everything's working, then you don't care about it, and you don't need to know how it works. And then following on from that, understanding what's underlaying our lives, because we have all of our information now on the internet and our computers. So I feel like it's very important to know how this stuff works, because if you don't, then you're just doing things, putting your data places, and you don't know who has access to it and whether it matters. Most of the time it probably doesn't, but there's a few cases where it definitely does. And yeah, fun, learning new perspectives, security, and this is something I'll give a few examples how you can like help your own security, and yeah, do things you didn't even know were possible. I think that's one of these things where you don't think about things from the hacker perspective until you've started messing and tinkering with code, and now with, you know, Python and R and things like that, you kind of understand how this machines interpret language. And just by messing around with, I don't know, website through your browser, you can change things and add scripts to do things. And then you find, oh, I didn't even know I needed this, but maybe just, I don't know, let's say to remove an annoying ad, you can just type in a code and get rid of it. Of course, you can have ad blockers and stuff as well, but where's the fun in that? Yeah, and experimentation, of course, just playing with anything, trying things for the sake of it, and like, you know, why not if you can do it? And curiosity, figuring out how it works, and then, yeah. I think it starts with the attitude. You have to want to investigate this stuff, and then your skills will come because you learn the steps necessary as you go along. Like, preparing for this, I knew, I will run through the example of like cracking a password, but like I knew more or less what was involved, but I forgot the steps because I haven't done it in a long time. So I had to Google it myself, but you know, it's not something that took very long, and you pick it up and you're like, okay, now I know how to do it. There's tutorials for everything now. You don't have to ask someone and potentially get into trouble. This was an example I wanted to give. Like, I know this is a lot of information. I'll share the slides if you want them or whatever, but like, this was something I wanted to just highlight because anytime you make a request on the internet, like every single time, there's so many steps to it. This is just the first step. So the command up the top is one I run on my computer, and you will have it, or a variant of it, called traceroute, and you say google.com. So if I type google.com in my browser, this is where my request goes from. So every packet of information goes through all of these hops. Every single one of these is a different server or a switch or communications infrastructure, and every one of these, I think Google's pretty good with their security in general, but every single one of these could be a point where something is compromised. So your information at any point along the way could be discovered. So this is at the top, that's my gateway or firewall. So if, of course, I wanted to, I could configure my firewall to track every piece of information that comes through it. But I'm not the only person that can do that. Any one of these steps can do that. Yes, so no longer can you be anonymous, well, at least not without any, great effort and extensive software and preparation and understanding, because it isn't just Facebook that's tracking our data. Everywhere we go on the internet, we're being tracked. And yes, unfortunately, there's been a lot of very public leaks, Amazon, LinkedIn, things like this, where someone has gone in, taken their entire database, which includes usernames and passwords, email addresses, and then published it on the dark web. So these are black hat hackers doing it for profit because they charge people money for it, and they're giving away people's personal information. So I wanted to illustrate this. Hopefully you'll have no results. But hey, go to this site, haveibeenowned.com, and put in your email address. This site it's a respectable site. You will put your email address in, and you're not giving any other information or putting your names and stuff. It just compares all of the known cracked databases that they have available.
Oh no.
What if when I enter my email and I press phone, I get phone?
Then you need to change all of your passwords.
All of your passwords? Or
Well,
just the ones...
Okay,
Because,
so this is the thing. I'm assuming that most people reuse passwords.
okay.
So if that password on any of the emails associated, like let's say it says LinkedIn, so if LinkedIn's compromised and use that LinkedIn password anywhere else, then you're fucked. Because that now lives in a database, and I can say log into Gmail and say, oh, this email address and your LinkedIn password.
Do you recommend using some of those password managers?
Absolutely. That's on my suggestion slide, but yes, definitely. There's plenty of options. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, doesn't really matter, but that's one really good way. I personally use it. I have one really strong password that I change now and then. Like, it's not a password, it's a passphrase with it's a grammatically correct sentence, and that is my passphrase to protect my vault. And then in there, I just generate the password. So I don't know any of my passwords. If someone said, what's your password for Gmail, and tortured me, I literally could not tell you. I don't know.
What about using Chrome and whatever Mozilla password?
Yeah, that's also fine. The only thing I have issue with that is it's a little bit less portable. Because if you want to use Firefox and you usually use Chrome, then you won't have your password.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I would recommend against it. Not because they're not necessarily secure or whatever, it's just it's not as portable. So some of the third-party solutions, there's a completely free open source one that has Android, iOS, desktop, browser integration and everything. And then there's other well-known ones like LastPass and Dashlane, that kind of thing. And this other site here, I would recommend just going to very quickly. So EFF is the Electronic Freedom Foundation, and basically they do a lot of fighting for, you know, rights on digital rights and security and just public awareness. And what this will do is just highlight, hopefully a little bit, how just how much information you give someone just by visiting their website. So it's most people are not going to even collect this information, but all it takes is one nefarious person. And I know that like Facebook and other places like that with their tracking, most people have a Facebook plugin on their website. That means that Facebook will track every website you visit that has that plugin. And Facebook do collect this other information. So even if you're anonymous, not logged in, whatever, it doesn't matter. Facebook still has a hidden profile of you, even if you don't have a Facebook account. Because they use all of this, what's called a browser fingerprint, among other things, to identify you. So with all that, you can, hey, basically, like they have a huge list of things, and if you join it all together with your computer screen resolution, the information of the browser, what version of Windows, what version of OS X, all that stuff together creates a unique you. And even if you don't have a Facebook account, they still know who you are. Yeah, so let's do some cracking. This was mine from my home PC. As you can see, it tells the browser which fonts I have installed. And this is, I already have like some level of protection on my browser. So this is less than what might appear for other people. But even so, it tells you which video card I have, which browser I'm using, where roughly I am because of the time zone, what screen resolution I'm running, all of this stuff. So even this alone, maybe not enough to make it completely unique to me, but probably quite close. And just to kind of give an idea of passwords, this is not exactly correct. I've got this image because it was the first I could find and I'm lazy. But you see how it's like 8 characters, 5 hours? Well, that's not true, because if you're brute forcing it, maybe, like brute forcing means going through every combination, like 11111, 11112, and then keep adding onto that. But brute forcing is the slowest way, but now because so many people use the same passwords, you can just download password lists and run that first. Before even trying brute forcing, which is slow, you run a list of 1 billion passwords that are known to be used by people commonly, and you can get one specifically for Danish, you can get one specifically for Swedish, whatever, and then you just run them, and then it'll go through those lists. And I guarantee you, in every one of those, doesn't matter which language it is, A, B, C, D, E, F, G will be in there, because people use that. And password as well. So it says, 5 hours, but it probably is more like 3 seconds. If you're brute forcing it, maybe that's a little bit more correct. So if you have your virtual machine and everything, we can try booting it up. If we're successful, that's great. Otherwise, I will give a demo. Hopefully that will work here as well.
Luke?
Yes?
Were we just supposed to install the virtual machine?
Yeah, and then you should be able to open... Yeah, you should be able to, with VMware, not VMware or whatever, it's VirtualBox, you should be able to open that image, because it should just be the complete operating system, which is... So the reason I picked this particular operating system was not just for this example, but because Kali Linux is one that is used by security researchers for penetration testing and for hacking. And the reason it is used for that is because it's really nice. You log in and it has all the tools necessary to start doing that security research. So I figured if you guys have it and installed, then you can mess around with it and see what's inside it yourself and have a play. So it's not really important that you have it ready to go now, but if you do, that's a bonus, because we are going to do some hacking. Okay. So this is my laptop, and I am doing it a different way to you because I couldn't get VirtualBox to work. Great example. But I'm just running Linux on my Windows, so I can go to... I can't even see what I'm doing. Doesn't matter. Oh, come on. All right. So I've got an empty folder here. So if you open up a terminal in Kali, you can do all of this just out of the box. There's nothing special needed or required. So if I make a file like, let's see, my secret password list, and this file is going to be called passwords.txt. What am I doing wrong? Oh, hang on. I'm jumping ahead of myself. So all I'm saying now is just write this string to this file. Right? So now if I look at my password file, it says my secret password list. So you can see now it's created this file. And if I want to make a zip file, I can just say zip. So you know, zip files and other things by default allow you to put a password, which same as like PDF files, all this kind of thing. Unfortunately, they're very easy to break, and it's not because of the zip thing specifically, it's just the way passwords are. So we can go zip, and then I'll put the passwords.zip and then passwords file. So it's going to ask me for a password now. To make it easy, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so now we have a zip file here, which is encrypted. So if I tried to open it, normally I would have to put a password in. But we have, where is it? Zip to John passwords.zip. Okay. Hash. Okay, so basically what I'm doing now is just this program John is the one that we'll use for cracking. It's called John the Ripper. So it takes the hashes from the password. So it doesn't, like in a zip file, you've got obviously the encryption section which relates to the password, but then you also have all the other files and all the information about that. You don't need all of that for the actual cracking part. So this will just take the password hash, which is the encrypted form of that password, and put it in a file. So now we can see if we cat zip hashes, this is what the hash looks like. So you can see here, like, it's this really complicated string. It doesn't mean anything, and you can't just get the password from looking at this. There's nothing you can tell about it. So that's why you have these utilities. John is brute force by default. You can send it the list, like I was saying, of these passwords. You can just pass it in and it'll run through every one of them. But with its default state, it just will do a brute force attack. And obviously, because I picked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's not going to take that long to go through all of them up to that point. But then if we say password, no, it's zip.hashes. Done. Okay, so we don't see the password just yet, but I can do John and then show and then zip.hashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we have the password. I can unlock it without ever asking anyone. And that's kind of what I wanted to demonstrate with like Kali. Like that John program is just one of the things that's built into it. But there is so much more. I don't know how this is going to work. I'm streaming and running a PowerPoint presentation, and now I'm adding more to it. Oh, it actually worked. That's good. F8. Come on. Where's my mouse? There we go. Okay, so this is what the Kali UI is. It's like, you know, it's just a Linux operating system. There's nothing specifically special about it except for the fact that it's security focused. So in here, you like have all of these menus by default with things like forensics, which is recovering data from someone's hard drive. So if someone deletes a file, you can get that file back. Then exploitation tools, so that's specifically to do with computer bugs and vulnerabilities. And information gathering, that's to do with the social engineering side. So you can use these applications which allow you to create, well, we've been working a little bit with Obsidian and other kind of mapping of neural ideas. You do that with people. So you will have a target, and then you will put the person in this software, and then you can create all their connections, you'll create their own social map, and then you can find attack avenues to get in. Maybe a friend that works with them, maybe the coffee shop they go to, you can go hang out there and listen to their conversations over lunchtime. Maybe you can become friends with them, join their squash club, and then you'll be into the systems in no time. Yeah, I don't really want to go into too much detail of this because it's a bit like too advanced, and you can definitely play with all of these tools. You're not going to do anything harmful, because if you run it inside a VM, if you break it, it doesn't matter. You can just delete the virtual machine and start again. Like, there is zero risk. Unless you start hacking remote systems, then you can get in trouble. But if you're playing around with it on your own machine, then there's no issue. All right. So we've done that.
Just a question.
Yes.
Does this brute force through like characters, numbers, like everything?
Yeah, including like symbols and whatever.
Yeah.
But you can customize everything. Like what I showed there was just the absolute default, like no settings.
And by default, it goes for numbers only? Or
No, it's all alphanumeric, and I think it includes as well like $sign, what do you call it? The hat sign, whatever, and other symbols as well that are commonly used. But yeah, you can completely customize all of that. Yes.
What happens if like the system has you cannot try entering the password more than 3 times, for example? Is it possible to brute force then? Because
yeah, so it depends on how they configure it, because most systems don't have a lockout policy. So you will be able to just try it, and if it says, well, now you have to wait 2 minutes, you can actually make software. You wouldn't use John, you'd use another one specifically designed for a web attack, but basically it's the same principle, and then you just say wait like 5 minutes between each attempt. Of course, then it's going to take a lot longer. So that's where the social engineering side really comes into it, because you need to start thinking about what kind of passwords people might use. So if you hang out with them at the cafe and you find out they've got a dog called, Sebastian or something, then you might decide to try that. Or you might find out they have a kid and find the year they're born in. Then you put the kid's name, capitals, lowercase, all kinds of things. And you can say, try this, every variant of this string. So you say like, I don't know, Brandon or something, and then it will have like capitals for each one and like lowercase and then numbers at the end. But that makes it a lot easier, because then you can limit the things that you're trying rather than everything that's possible, because that will take forever. Like it's practically impossible to break a password that's really long. So this is like the kind of suggestions of how you can easily do some things to protect yourself a little bit more online. I think these are things that everyone already knows, but it's like that initial hurdle to do is a little bit much. Like it just takes a few minutes to set up, but then you have to maybe change your workflow a little bit or whatever. And I understand, because I've been there myself, it's a pain in the ass, but these are really, really easy things to do. A VPN, they're very cheap now. I think like, I don't know, $3 a month or less, depending on what you get. And that will just protect you when you're online. Like one of my friends, he wanted to try and like get a paper like for his studies, and I recommended this site which allows you to like get any paper without accessing the journals, which is really useful, especially as a student, because you don't have to pay $50 to access a paper that you may not even use. So he couldn't visit that because his ISP blocked it, which means that they are tracking which sites he's visiting. And he also had that with other sites that are like not necessarily illegal, but like not that, scrupulous or whatever, and they were blocked. So if you use a VPN, you can get around that, but it also implies that like his ISP tracks what they're doing, and that may get reported to authorities and stuff, even if you stumble on it accidentally, which really sucks. I recommend Firefox over Chrome and other things, mainly because it's outside of the Google ecosystem. And DuckDuckGo is the search engine. That's something that's optional, but again, Google track everything. So if you use Google, you can find information about what Google knows about you, and it's usually quite a lot. And uBlock Origin is just an ad blocker that works on Firefox, Chrome, Edge, Safari, Firefox Mobile, everything. So like, just install it. It takes like a second, and you will see not like at the default setup, you will see hardly any ads. And if there's a site that you want to support with their ads, you can absolutely do that. You can whitelist it. You can say like I don't know how many of you know about Ecosia, but it's a search engine that you can use to like they donate a part of their money to planting trees. So it's a really nice idea. But of course, the money comes from advertising. So if you have an ad blocker and visit there, they're not going to get money. So if you want to give them the money through advertising, you would whitelist it and allow it. But ads are really nefarious, and so many times they're like intentionally made so you click on them and they're not even what they're representing. It's like, you know, that you go to a site and it says click here to download. The download button is an ad which makes you install a virus or something. So I think it's ad block is essential, not just because ads are annoying, but also for security. And an antivirus, like, you know, this is something that on Mac you haven't necessarily had to worry too much about, because most exploits didn't target Mac until more recently, because more and more people have been using it over the last 10 years, so it's become more of a focus. And just like any other system, they have vulnerabilities. So AVG is fine, it's nice, a good one for Mac, and for Windows, you don't need anything more than Windows Defender. It does a really great job. It used to be kind of iffy, but there's no point in installing McAfee and Avast and all this other shit that has like pop-ups and crap on it. And yeah, less easy fixes, VPN plus Tor. So if you're really starting to think about doing something, you know, a little bit unethical, then maybe you should consider using a VPN and Tor browser, which adds an extra layer of security. Tor can still be tracked, which is why you should also have VPN, and then probably use your neighbor's Wi-Fi, or preferably not your neighbor's, preferably someone who lives quite away from your house, because hackers have been caught many times because even though they've used the neighbor's Wi-Fi, it limits the area to like a very, very small radius. And that's one of the things that, of course, the government uses, but there's also an open SSID map website. So every network you connect to has an SSID, which is like here, it's all, what is it? Like Alus Uni, Guest or whatever, and that kind of thing. So those ones are in a database, and you can look up this database and you can put in the name of the network, and it will tell you where in the world it is. So if there's one with 50 of the same around the world, well, you can pinpoint it, but then if you have more information, like you know it's someone from Aarhus, then you can say, oh, well, it's probably around this area, because you can, all of that is logged in your computer, and quite often when you connect to a network, your computer will say, these are all the networks I previously connected, are one of you here? So if someone's listening, they can catch all that. Yes?
So when you use VPN, can you not like connect to a different part of the world, but can it still be tracked back to like your actual location?
So there's yes and no. I mean, if the VPN you use is a good one and they do what they're supposed to and don't keep logs, then the authorities can't just contact them and say, hey, who was connected at this time? But at the same time, because of the things I mentioned earlier, like browser fingerprinting and whatever, if you're just using your own computer, not a virtual machine can actually help with this thing, but if you're using your own computer and your normal browser, then using that information, someone can still find out who you are. So it's better to use a VPN, but of course it's not 100% secure. People can still be tracked. Same as with Tor. People thought they were safe, selling drugs online, whatever. You know, it's a great place for that, getting hitmen, all those kind of things. But it's really up to the people to be secure as well, because you can connect to it, and in theory the network itself is secure, but if you connect to a node where there's only a few people connected, then they can trace that back. So, you know, there's always a point where you come in and out of the system, and if that's something that is uniquely identifiable, then you'll be able to be tracked.
So what you're saying is that we should hack whenever we're at the university, because there's more use.
that's probably a good place to do it. As long as again you add the extra levels of security, because I'm not sure. This is kind of off tangent, but it's something that I care about a little bit. It's like this idea of freedom of information, not like freedom of speech kind of thing, but like just that information and research and whatever should be shared. There was this young guy that was like studying at a university, and I can't remember which one it was. I think it was somewhere in the States. But basically he connected his laptop to one of the mainframes and downloaded all of the papers by using the uni system, right? So you connected through the network, then you can download all of the academic papers. And he downloaded like hundreds of thousands of papers. And he just shared that with everyone, which is, I think, a really nice thing. But he ended up committing suicide because the authorities were just harassing and pursuing him and threatening him with lawsuits and basically just ruining the rest of his life. And he was already someone, of course, suffering with depression and stuff, so it didn't help the situation. But like, yeah, he probably had some security measures in place, but then, all it takes is someone to walk past and be like, oh, I know whose that laptop that is, or, there's always ways that things get found out if you're not like extra careful. Yeah, like other things, online backup, highly recommended. That's a little bit more of a hassle setup, but it's something that means if you lose your computer, then you have a way to get the information back. There's ways to do it that are encrypted, that they don't have access to it, but they just store your info. Virtual machines, again, just really good sandbox playground. You can mess around and do things and not risk damaging your computer or other people's. And encrypting the disk, well, yeah, if someone plugs in a hard drive from your computer, they can read all the files on there. If it's encrypted, they can't without your password. Right, so I guess I will try and speed this up because it's been about an hour now. But yes, the number one attack vector is what's, I guess, affectionately called in the IT industry PEBCAC, which is the problem exists between the keyboard and computer, which is always the thing. Like it's the people that are using the applications that are the ones most vulnerable to the attack. It's way more effective than just hacking nowadays. Like there's software that hasn't been updated that you can crack into, but like the easiest way is social engineering. We all have cognitive biases and we have kind of shared behaviors, and this stuff can be exploited very easily. And some examples of this are like phishing and spear phishing. So phishing is emails that we've all probably received that are like, the Nigerian scams, they just send out to everyone. They're all exactly the same, but it's like, hey, you want to be rich? Just send me the money to transfer it and come meet me in Nigeria and we're going to be rich together and I'm a prince. And the spear phishing is more targeted, so you would get a little bit of information about someone beforehand and then say, hey, I know you've been looking at Amazon, but there's a problem with your account, so please click here to fix the problem and we can process your order. So it would be a bit more specific, the more details the better, and then you create a fake site that redirects to the real Amazon site, they put their username and password in, you've got their username and password. And then this whole thing is all encompassed in like social engineering, and that's what is when people are doing penetration testing, which are white hat hackers employed by a company, let's say a bank, to hack into their networks. They will use all of these methods to try and get people inside of the network to open a file, install some software, or just let them in. One of the classic examples is the high-vis vest. It gets you anywhere. If you wear a high-vis vest and you go around to the dock of a supermarket, let's say Vertex, most people probably not going to look at you twice. You can walk around, you can poke at things, and people just think you're doing your job. And same thing on the other side, you come with a clipboard, or pretend you're there for a job interview and say, can you please print this resume out for me because I was running late and I'm really stressed and I really need this job because my kids are dying. You would really do me a huge favor to print this out right now. So they plug it in and then they've got a virus in their computer or a backdoor. Password reuse. If you reuse your passwords and any one of those is compromised, then all of them are compromised because your email address is forever on the internet associated with that password. So people wanting to do targeted attacks or general attacks can just use those credentials and try it on every site. Doesn't matter, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. So that's why, you know, they have now a big push for two-factor authentication using extra codes, whatever. Kali Linux, yeah, that's a really great tool to mess around with to find information about people. And this site I would recommend having a look at. This is the attack vectors section for social engineering. This guy who made it is kind of interesting. Social engineering is really cool, but also has a lot of bullshit and pseudoscience. They talk about things like neuro-linguistic programming, which is not really a thing. But it does base itself in some cognitive principles, right? Like mirroring the other person, making yourself amicable, really filling the role that they need you to be filled, and that kind of thing. Using people's expectations, general kindness, exploiting that. You know, it's something that is nice to kind of think about when you're having daily interactions, not necessarily from a negative perspective, but just like, how am I being manipulated and manipulating other people in any given situation? Yeah, so like Maltego, I'll show you a screenshot in a second, but it's the tool I mentioned that allows you to map people's social networks. Social engineering toolkit extends on that. And then things that they use, like burner phones, so you can't be traced by your actual phone, and it's like a phone you can throw away, like an old Nokia or something. Yeah, obviously like tracking people with cameras and all that stuff, the usual. Yeah, so this is what Maltego looks like. So it's similar in a lot of ways to Obsidian and the concepts behind it, because you're creating this representation of the data, but in a way that kind of represents the person's real life. So you're like, okay, this is their uncle and aunt, this is their friend that they met in this country, and that was one of the best times in their life, so they may put heavy emphasis on this, so I should pretend I'm from this area. Or these people, they know really well, so I shouldn't pretend to know them, because they would immediately know if I said a detail that was incorrect. Yes?
Can we use that to search up ourselves? Would it be possible?
Yes, there are these tools here that are kind of inbuilt into it, and you can use some of them to find some information about yourself. So I highly recommend doing that. If you've never Googled yourself, you absolutely should, because not out of egotistical thing, just to see what other people can know about you before you've ever met them. Yeah, exploits and vulnerabilities. So this is just the more technical side of it rather than the human side. So when people write code, as we all know, it sometimes goes wrong, and sometimes things are unexpected. And when these things happen, someone doesn't check something correctly, like for our experiment, if you put in a name rather than an ID, well, that just worked for most people's. But then in that case, it doesn't really matter. But in a situation where you're trying to get into someone's database, that could make a huge, huge difference. So that's the kind of thing that you have to prepare for if you're doing any coding that requires like someone else to put data in, because they could just do it wrong and break everything. Then there's like different attacks that you can use, like network, man in the middle, which is where you sit in between two computers and then you monitor the traffic or change things. Yep.
I've heard a lot about RSA encryption, right?
Mm.
That's kind of like to protect messages sent into computers, right?
Yeah.
How do you actually compromise stuff like that with manual attacks?
So when you have end-to-end encryption, it becomes a little bit harder, but it's not impossible, because what you can do is spoof security certificates, or you do it, you have to have a little bit extra, like you have to get the user to install a security certificate, or you install it on their machine, and then that will say that your server is also authorized to accept that traffic.
Okay, so you get the private and public keys.
Yeah. So it's not as easy with end-to-end encryption, but unfortunately a lot of protocols still don't use end-to-end encryption. This is what a monitoring network traffic will look like. I did this once at my old work at a council, like I was working for the government in the UK, and I uncovered, just by doing this, I wasn't doing anything nefarious, I was just monitoring the traffic and got like 10 different users' passwords. So Yeah, because when they connected to the mail servers, they weren't encrypted. So they'd say, this is my email address and password, and you could see it in plain text. And this is the classic XKCD comic of a mother who named her son Robert drop table students. SQL drop table means delete the table of data. So the joke is that the student name went into the database and all of the student data was lost. And then finally, putting it all together, so you can use the hacker mindset in daily life. Think about how you would exploit the situation or how other people would. Basically just messing around with everything that you come across. Like, if you don't understand how something works, just poke at it until you figure it out. And then, the programming stuff, that's kind of a skill that is necessary, but you kind of learn that along the way as well, because you can just learn to do basic commands, and once you figure out how it works, then you kind of extend your knowledge on that. Just messing around with everything, and of course, breaking everything. And this was something I posted yesterday on the Obsidian forum, because I wanted to copy some stuff to notes and break them out, and someone had made a nice little script, and it didn't work that well. It kind of was problematic. So I fixed it and replied with the updated post. But this was all, I didn't know anything about how the Obsidian backend works. I know, of course, JavaScript, whatever, that's a programming language I'm fairly familiar with. But still, just because of that, I could put the things I already knew and just mess around with it until it did what I wanted. So I didn't know, this doc thing, I didn't know anything about what that looked like. But then in the browser, you can mess around and find out what the structure is, what methods it has, and from there I found out I could use, get the new file parent, which is the default place where you create a node. So that now creates it in the default place rather than just in the top level, which the person who created it did. It's just little things like that, and that's where it becomes really useful, because it's just tinkering. If you don't know, or if you think this software is shit because it doesn't do what you want to do, well, maybe there's a way to hack it and you can make it do what you want. And I've used that so often, and it's been so useful. Just renaming files. I'm really bad at organization with everything. So at one point I had probably 10 years worth of digital photos just scattered everywhere. So I just wrote a quick Python script that loaded every file, got the date it was created, and then organized it into directories by month and year. And it was it took maybe 10 minutes to write, and it organized everything so I could have it all by the year and month and stuff. And finally, the lockpicking, I thought I'd put a little illustration of how it actually works. And because I forgot to bring the stuff, I feel really bad. But if you want to try, I don't know, if there's any cameras in here, but you could try on that door. It's probably more secure than, this little kit can do, but you can maybe have a little bit of a feel for it. You won't do any damage as long as you don't press too hard. So, yeah. Any questions? Yes.
I'm totally new to this, but I'm kind of interested. So where do I go from here? If I want to get started.
So I'll post the slides probably on the Facebook group, and I have a bunch of resources that I will add to it. I didn't put that in the slides yet, but I will add it as a last slide with a few links. I think just to start, I would really, really recommend a podcast that I think I posted in the the group for the general group, cognitive science group, I think. And it was about it's Darknet Diaries, it's called, and he just covers all these really interesting hacking events from history and the past and more recent times, and the way he covers it is interesting, and it's at a level that anyone can understand. So it helps, of course, if you know a bit more, because then you can think about whether he's saying the correct thing or not. But it's targeted at a lower level audience, so you can just listen to it and be like, oh, I never thought that this would be possible, that someone would get into a system this way. And he does talk a lot about social engineering, a lot about actual proper hacking and breaking files down and finding out what they do in memory and stuff like that. But he doesn't go into excruciating detail. So I think it's a really good entry level point. And yeah, the social engineering framework is also nice, and just play around with Kali Linux. Just think of something that you might want to do, just for example, monitoring the traffic on your computer, the network. You can download Wireshark. It doesn't need to be in color. You can have it on Mac and Windows. And Wireshark's a program that just logs all the traffic, and you can see what's happening on your machine. You might even discover that there's something talking to a website that you don't even know about. I've done it on my phone before, and I did it on my partner's phone, and she had a Chinese phone, and I saw there was apps in there that were like system level, you don't see them, and they were sending information back to Chinese servers. So I deleted those apps that were invisible, and yeah, but of course if I hadn't done that, I would never have found out, because I have like network monitoring on my home network, so I could see these weird requests to China happening. I'm like, where the fuck is that coming from? And yeah, so those are the kind of things. Just like think about something maybe that interests you of it specifically. Like, yeah, if it's about passwords, then play around with John the Ripper, like the password cracking utility. And there is so much on the internet, like in terms of resources. I think that brain video that I played a little bit of is quite interesting, like the Mikko Hyppönen, because he's done a lot of security research over many years. So his perspective, and that's done in a really fun and easy way as well. Like he goes and talks to people in Pakistan. Yeah.
So are there like trial websites that like are made specifically to help people get started?
Yes. Actually, that's also a thing that what I was going to put on the resources, because there is, where is it? There's one that I did something like some playing around with when I was really young, and I was very surprised to find out that it still exists. It's called ModX, and that's like just like is a little puzzle challenge thing. It's not specifically hacking, but you can use tools for hacking to kind of break into it and that kind of thing. And there's another one called Hack This Site, and that is a playground for hackers as well. But again, the same thing. You can, I would start with something easy, maybe install a virtual machine of Windows 95, and then you can just put a tool on it, like a virus or whatever, and see what happens, and then you can play around with that. And there's a nice, Mikko Hyppönen also put in the Internet Archive list of runnable original viruses. So there's like all the ones from the 80s and 90s. He's got them there, and you can just open them and see what it looked like to be infected with that virus.
Is there like a main hacking programming language?
No, not at all.
System.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on your skills, your target operating system, what you're trying to do. Because if you're going for really low-level hacks, then you need to use assembly language, because you'll decompile an executable or binary file. It's meaningless, but it's just a bunch of steps that the processor runs. So for new software, that's really difficult because they're like so big and it takes a lot. But like the older ones, you could just disassemble it and see. Like I've done this with old games before. You can see where in the memory it stores how many coins you have. And then you can just change the number and say, all right, now I have 9,999 coins. Problem is, this is where you have to know a little bit more about the technical side of things. I mean, it doesn't matter if you mess it up, but you want to know why it goes wrong. If you put in 65,566 coins, then it would probably break, because that overflows the size of the memory. And then the whole software would stop or start doing weird stuff. So yeah, that's like, you know, you can do it to a certain degree and like, now I'm rich, and then the next thing you're broke. That actually happened with Bitcoin, because someone hacked the Bitcoin network and gave themselves like billions of Bitcoins, but it overflowed the buffer for that, wherever they'd stored that, and it actually went into the negative, and it broke the whole network. So yeah.
But he wouldn't have gotten caught if he just maybe given himself like 60 Bitcoin.
I'm not sure. I think he relied on the fact that it was breaking it to try and get it to work in the first place, because it was something where you needed to, like, by default, Bitcoin's fairly secure, so finding exploits to that level it's pretty rare. But yeah, I think he relied on some kind of like crash to get to that point, but then yeah, maybe it went wrong or whatever, and then they updated security after that very quickly. Yeah. Anything else? No. All right. Well, thank you.